Apologies for the slight delay. We're trying to tot up numbers and identify heads. I think we're there. Before we start the meeting proper, can I just say a little bit of words of thanks to Liz Baxter, who retires this week after 13 years. And she's obviously overcome my grief at the idea. After 13 years with the authority, working within quality improvement and more recently with leadership of the early learning and childcare expansion, which is a very important project for our council. And I'd just like to thank her on behalf of the committee for all her expertise and dedication and hard work and experience in bringing this plan to us as members. We will very much miss her wisdom and her very positive aspect to everything she's been involved with. She's had a long, just looking at this briefing, and she said, had a brief history of time. She's had a very long career within education, not just within Dumfries and Galloway, but up in Orkney and in Coventry and Warwickshire as well. So Liz, thanks very much for all your work for the council and for this committee. And I hope you very much enjoy a long and very happy retirement. Thanks, Liz.
And we'll see if I can meet. Yeah.
Yes. And you can always come back as a councillor if you want. Okay, so we move to the meeting proper. Thank you, members, and welcome to the November meeting of the Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning Committee. And can I just remind members that this meeting will be recorded and will subsequently be made available to the public. So, Lucy, do we have SEDERUNT and apologies?
Good morning, everyone. We have 22 members present. And so far, I have received apologies from the following: Councillor Surtees, Councillor Karen Crothers, Councillor Fairbairn, Sam Scobie, and George Jameson. Councillor Charteris is not present, but may be along later in the meeting. Is that?
I think that's correct. His apologies certainly for the start of the meeting, though. He may just depend on how he gets on. He's got an appointment. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, noted, and I'll update the minute accordingly if he doesn't appear. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. And that dinging sound in my pocket reminds me when members put their phones to silence. Okay, do you have any declarations of interest? In that case, can we move to page 9, minutes of the previous meeting of 13th September 2019? Members, are you happy with that? Ronnie?
Chair, Councillor Blake's apologies were given at the start of the meeting, but it's not in the minutes. And I think also that Councillor Crothers came in about 10:50 or something like that, and that's not recorded in the minute either.
Okay, I would just like to, I've sought some confirmation on this point this morning because I knew it was going to be raised. Councillor Crothers had approached me at the start of the meeting, but I did misunderstand it was a bit unclear on what he meant. But he's just confirmed at that point he wasn't entirely sure whether Councillor Blake would be replaced, and that's what the apologies were given. I will note the entrance at 10:50 AM, that can be updated.
But for accuracy, the apologies were given, so that should be in the book. Either that or Councillor Blake was absent for the meeting at the start. So,
Councillor Blake did formally email into the office at 11 o'clock, but because the standing orders are silent on any time limits in giving the notice, we made the decision that we would allow Councillor Crothers to replace Councillor Blake. There is a report that's going up to change the standing orders that suggests a change and put in a time limit in December, I believe.
I think for accuracy, Councillor Blake's apologies should be in at the start because there was no councillor available to 11 o'clock, as you said. An email didn't come in to replace Councillor Blake. But in the hand, it's always been the case that when apologies are given or an absent recording is given, that's for the meeting. So you can't change that just by yourself. That's the case. It is. You know, if apologies were given, that's for the meeting. If he was absent, then he's absent for the meeting.
Okay, I'll note that. Thank you.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. My point's on a different point, page 15, 11, 10. I just thought we'd agreed to see a further report in regards to early learning and childcare at this meeting, but obviously it would be an update on the back of what was happening at a national level. I just wondered if we had any information. I'm not trying to raise matters arising or anything, just I thought for the accuracy, did we actually agree to have a further report, and if not, was there a particular reason why not?
Gillian?
Thank you. Yes, we had agreed to bring a standing item to the committee with early learning and childcare. However, the last paper highlighted we were awaiting national guidance, and that guidance was expected in mid-November but has not yet been received. But we'll certainly give an update to members as soon as that guidance is received from Scottish Government.
So, are we happy to agree the minutes with the correction? Yep. Okay, so if we move to item 4, Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning Service Review Budget Monitoring Report 2018 to 19 for the period ended 30th of September 2018. This is a report from Gillian. This is the fairly standard update. We've got Colin Pentland to speak to this. Colin, is there anything you want to add to your report?
Nothing in the content of the report. However, I'd just like to point out and apologise to members that an error occurred in the report that resulted in a mistake to the bullet pointing down the sides. So, for example, as you're probably aware, there's been some numbers repeated and a couple of numbers missed within 3.1 to... sorry.
Members? Ivor?
Chair, it's just with regard to the Dalbeattie Learning Campus running costs of, was it 198,000 over? I note further in the papers we've assumed control of the bridge. Is there any further costs that could be attributed to that with unexpected costs with regards to rates, etc.?
There is a review of all non-domestic rates as it's highlighted in Appendix 2. We're looking at the rates and rate relief across the school estate so that we have a very clear picture of what we expect for the new builds and the refurbishment.
Nick?
Yeah, the budgets seem to be under extreme pressure here, and I think years and years of cuts are really hitting home now to us. There's a £841,000 projected overspend this year, and there's an action plan there. How realistic is that the action plan will deliver reduced savings, and can you just update us on what progress you're making?
Gillian?
We're meeting monthly with our finance officers, and the action plans until the end of March have been highlighted in Appendix 2 and have been allocated responsible officers who are very aware of the task to bring these budgets back under control. But they are under significant pressure, as Policy and Resources Committee heard. Social work budget, particularly with kinship and out of region placements, is under significant pressure.
You want to come back?
Yeah, I think this doesn't augur well for next year's budget, and I think we've got to be putting pressure on the Scottish Government to supporting the education services across the country, perhaps focusing less on their own initiatives at national level, because we're not delivering on the basics here. And can we get assurance that you will be taking this up, Jeff, and trying to get a fair settlement for the education?
Well, obviously, COSLA's position is that the local government needs to be funded fairly, and they are lobbying very hard, the Scottish Government, to ensure that we do get a substantial increase in the budget in order to tackle the problems which are being identified after all the years of cuts. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. And my point's kind of been brought up there by Councillor Brodie. The service is under an enormous amount of pressure. I mean, it's quite clear that there is pressures there. And I do welcome the action plan that we've got in Appendix 2. We've got 4 of the action plans have a completion date of the end of January. Now, I'm just conscious that officers are working exceedingly hard, and do we have the officer capacity to meet those completion dates? And are the officers being supported? Because clearly, our officers are under an awful lot of pressure, and how is we as a council, how are we supporting them to deliver these other budget pressures? So it's just really looking for reassurance that are these realistic, because we have to be mindful that, these are, our officers are working really hard and we need to support them in this role.
Thank you. We are aware officers are under great pressure. It's our duty to bring service within budget for your scrutiny. This is a pragmatic action plan, and these targets are achievable, but it will be difficult. This is a priority, and at the moment we are balancing a number of priorities. But I do assure you we've got good support from finance, we've got a lot of expertise in the team, and we're working closely together with our colleagues in social work and health to target the small number of very complex and expensive cases that we're dealing with.
Julie?
Thank you. I just wanted to raise some concerns as the primary teacher representative that we've already been faced with lots of cuts across primary schools and indeed our secondary schools across Dumfries and Galloway. Staff are finding it increasingly difficult to cope with the demands in classrooms due to support staff having been cut. We've got more and more children with complex needs in classrooms without appropriate support. Now, staff are doing their very, very best, but I have to hold my hands up and say we are struggling as a profession with this. And I appreciate that Cut's agenda has come from Westminster and isn't a Dumfries and Galloway agenda, but I've got real concerns that exclusion rates are going to begin to increase again, simply because we can't cope with the demands in the classroom. And we've also got issues with pupil attainment. Now, the PEF funding has alleviated some of that. If you're in a school that receives the PEF funding, you've been able to employ additional staff to help support these children. But in our smaller rural schools, our children have lost the support that they had. And I've got real concerns for these children and for them moving on to secondary school as well. So my plea is, can you look really, really carefully and somehow find a way to support us with this, because the children need the support and the staff in schools are needing the support too, not just your officers trying to make the cuts. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we really do appreciate the hard work of all of our staff, both within the schools and within the council as a whole. We've had to make almost £90 million worth of savings over the last few years. And I think according to the order of best value, we're looking to have to probably save about another 80 million over the next few years. So it is a desperately difficult place to be in at the moment. But Gillian, would you like to respond?
Yes, absolutely recognise the pressures on staff and the increase in need across the board. There's a paper coming later in the committee on supporting learners and the review of supporting learners. And I think taking the expectations of communities and the needs of the schools, perhaps we need to look at doing things slightly differently. And I think Hugh's paper, perhaps we could delve into more detail in Hugh's paper later. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got no one else wanting to speak. So, sorry, David.
I feel now under tight budget restraints, we are missing a golden chance in some of our new state-of-the-art schools to make a bit of income. I know at Dalbeattie, they've got a state-of-the-art gymnasium. 14 months down the line, it's not even open to the public of Dalbeattie to use. And I believe there's other schools that got a lot of money spent on them, and some of their facilities aren't getting used. I feel we're missing a golden chance to make money.
Yeah, perhaps that's something we could look at in the future in terms of actually maximising the use of these schools, because they are community assets, so we should be using them as much as possible. Ivan?
Chair, it's just with regard to that. My understanding there was an FOI request with regard to the suitability of Dalbeattie School. There was fire issues whereby fire breaks have not been put in. So is it the case that we can't go into Dalbeattie because it's not suitable? And I believe those fire things, I've got the report here, were identified August 18. If it's been open 14 months, where are children in a school that wasn't fire safe?
Okay.
I am not aware of the reasons why WT campus is not open to the public at that time. That's certainly something I can explore and come back to members with. And with regards to any snagging that we've had to undertake through WT campus, certainly that work is being undertaken. Paul will be joining us later on in this committee. I understand that the snagging is progressing well. Can I come back to you on that particular issue, Councillor, in terms of the links between any snagging and the community use of the school? Because that's not something I'm familiar with at the moment.
Adam?
Thanks, Chair. I see that the Conservative group have listened to some FY and seem to have a list of a number of these problems that they've shared among their group. Would they be keen enough to share them with the rest of the committee, please? Thank you.
Chair, if somebody wants to print it off, I'm sure there's a list of 400 and odd, but some of them are minor issues, but there are major ones, I would say, where you've actually got fire breaks not in place. So that would be one. So if anybody wants to print it off there,
Perhaps we can
I'll
sort
hand
that
it over
out.
to the officers.
We can do that after the meeting. Okay. So, sorry? Well, we can do that outside the meeting. That's nothing to do with the budget as we're discussing at the moment. So, can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3? Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we move to item 5, which is on page 29, recruitment and appointment of teachers to promoted posts in Dumfries and Galloway. Teacher appointment procedures are a delegated matter for the LNCT. However, elected member input is welcome for the position of head teacher as the senior officer of the council. Members will recall that this item was presented to the May CYPLL committee. Members requested amendments to the constitution of the final interview for head teacher. The LNCT have considered members' comments and views and revised the procedure to take account of these. Unfortunately, the original procedure was sent out by mistake, so you will now have a revised document which has been tabled this morning, was emailed out yesterday. And we have John Thin to speak to this. John, is there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Again, apologies on behalf of the service in terms of the incorrect information that was sent round. Hopefully everybody now has got a copy, and really just to highlight the significant changes which were raised by members at the May Committee, which was under selection panel membership, and in particular under 6.2 for the head teacher position. That has been amended to reflect members' views, and that subsequently has meant that we've also amended under 4.2 in terms of final interview for the head teacher position, which reflects the second panel below the head teacher one under 6.2. So the deputy head teacher one has been amended based on the feedback from the May Committee. Happy to take questions.
Chair, have we got a paper copy of that? Because I only got mine on the email and it was on my phone and it didn't have 5253. There's overlapping pages or something that didn't come through in my phone.
Yeah, the paper copy is being distributed now, so do you want to take 5 minutes to have a look at it? Adam?
If we're taking 5 minutes to look at that, can we also get a copy of the list that the Conservatives mentioned in the last item, please?
Okay, members, are we had a chance to read it? Yep. Okay, any questions? Timothy?
Thank you, Chair. 6.2 on the revised paper, the composition of the panel for head teacher has inadvertently omitted reference to a church representative for denominational schools.
John? I think that is in the text somewhere, isn't it? Okay, thanks, Timothy. It'll be inserted. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've also got a question on 6.2 under the deputy head teacher. Well, on the head teacher post, the first bullet point says what the quorum should be. And the second deputy head teacher, there's no mention of what the quorum should be on that. So obviously you've got representation for elected members, what the minimum and maximum of that should be, but there's no quorum for that meeting. So it's just maybe, can we add what the quorum is? Would it be the same for the head teacher? Is it a minimum 6, maximum of 8? That's not in that table.
John?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think that would be helpful to add that to the policy. So, I mean, it would be, doing the numbers, quickly counting them, it would be a quorum of minimum of 4 and a maximum of 6 for deputy, so we can add that in, yeah.
And in terms of principal teacher, is there a minimum maximum for that one as well?
That's a set amount, yeah.
Jim?
Just kind of clarity, Chair. If you look at 4.2, the Stage 2 final interview for deputy head teachers posts, the paper talks about representation minimum of 1, maximum of 3 from the parent council and elected members. If you read that, as I read that, it could be either or. Whereas if you go to 6.2 and it talks about deputy head teacher, it says maximum of 3 made up from elected members and representatives. So there's a disparity there. 4.2 should be made up from, because it could be 3 parent council members or 3 elected members, whereas 6.2 quite clearly sets out what I think what the sentiment or the thoughts were, John.
Yeah, happy to accept that and add that in. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, but no one else looking to speak, so can we move to the... Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking for clarity on 3.8 in the paper with regard to option 2. It states 2 representatives from education officer, manager, in other words, 2 education department representatives. It does not indicate whether they have voting rights.
John?
Sorry, Councillor McComb, can you just advise which section again?
Option 2, 3.8 in the main paper.
Oh, sorry. So they were the options that were presented in the May committee. But yeah, the same principle would go with the new paper and the new policy, and all in the selection panel would have voting rights.
Including the education officers?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we move to the recommendations?
Chair, can I just get clarity in terms of, it's just to confirm that those who are already in the system or for jobs that are currently being advertised, do they follow the current system or will they be on the new adopted? Just for clarity for anybody who might be, well, hopefully we've got lots applying for lots of jobs that we have.
Lots of planning and lots of jobs, yes. That's certainly the forecast. Yeah, those who are currently in the system, if you like, with the current procedures will continue to go through the process with the current procedures.
Okay, so moving to the recommendations with the various corrections, can we agree 2.1, agree 2.2, and approve 2.3? Yep, thank you. So if we move to agenda item 6 on page 93, this is the Southwest Education Improvement Collaborative Phase 2 Improvement Plan, Workforce Plan. This report presents members the updated SWIC Phase 2 Improvement Plan and Workforce Plan. The updated plan reflects a significant amount of work which has gone into progress in the main work streams and the further collaboration which has been undertaken across the 4 local authorities, which are our council, East Ayrshire, North Ayrshire and South Ayrshire, since the initial publication of the plan in January 2018. This work, which is based on capacity building at all levels, is supporting the development of a more detailed performance frameworks to measure and report on impact as well as invest in the professional autonomy of our head teachers and teachers. The report also informs members that as a result of a successful funding bid made to the strategic leads to Scottish Government, a workforce plan to support the regional leads team has been taken forward. This is outlined in the report, and the appendices to the report include a copy of the updated SWIC Phase 2 plan and a copy of the SWIC branding. And we have Sheila Rushby to speak to this. Sheila, is there anything you want to add?
I've got nothing further that I want to add, but I'm happy to take questions.
Julian, do you want to just give us an update of what the Regional Improvement Collaborative are looking to do?
Sorry, the Regional Improvement Collaborative has been working across the 4 authorities with 4 main work streams, one focusing on early years, one linked to the broad general education, another one linked to our use of PEF and closing the attainment gap, and we've been working on one linked to leadership capacity, developing leadership capacity and staffing career and professional learning development. That had predominantly been secondary based, but moving forward we've now incorporated primary into that. The work has involved a considerable amount of consultation across the 4 authorities with staff, with parents, just to get the feel of what it is. It has to bring added value. It hasn't to be something that's just simply business as usual. We want to add something else that builds into the 4 national improvement priorities alongside the improvement priorities of our own local authority. The work is progressing, but it has to progress so that we've got a framework so we can actually look at the impact of it. We don't want just this to be people just moving around and going to meetings for meetings' sake. It has to have some impact, an impact on children that are in the classroom.
Thanks, Sheila. Julie?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions around the staffing. I noticed on page 107 that each local authority has shared their staffing standard to identify potential efficiencies. Should I read that as teacher cuts?
No, it is about looking at opportunities to share across the authorities, perhaps going on secondments into other authorities and people coming in to work with their own authority.
Okay, I have some questions on that in itself, because my understanding is any post created would have to go through LNCT, which is our local negotiating committee for teachers, and Dumfries and Galloway would have to remain as the employer. Is that correct?
That's indeed the case, yes. Yes.
Jim McCall.
Thank you, Chair. Page 132. The tariff scores. Have you any idea what South Ayrshire's secret is, looking at the tariff scores there?
And I think the South Ayrshire attainment in terms of the tariff scores, I think the Insight report in Appendix 4 shows us that certainly Dumfries and Galloway are not the junior partner in this collaborative. There's a lot of data here that shows in our attendance, our exclusions and our attainment across the board that we do very well against our comparator authorities. I think the demographic between South Ayrshire and Dumfries and Galloway is different. So if we're comparing ourselves to East Ayrshire or North Ayrshire, we do very well. South Ayrshire, if we looked at the degree of PEF funding that South Ayrshire was in receipt of, they have a smaller number of children on free school meals. So we're talking about a different demographic. But if they have a secret, that's the purpose of the South West Collaborative, so that we can establish what that is.
Chair, I have a second question here. Page 146. The attainment gap. Do we have the widest gap of the 4 areas?
I think when we're looking at that data, we've got to remember that this is experimental data in relation to the curriculum for excellence levels. And we've been working with our schools to build that confidence in making those appropriate assessment judgments. That's taken quite a lot of time to bed in the quality assurance and moderation, which will upskill our teachers to make those accurate judgments. I think we have to look at this data very much as the fact that it is termed experimental, and again, when it's published in the beginning of December, it will again be experimental. But what I can say is that our teachers are beginning to feel more confident in making those assessment judgments. I think in the past, they saw it that they had to see 100% attainment at that level before they would agree to say that that child has achieved that level. What we've been doing is working with teachers to get them to understand that we're not looking for that 100% perfection. If we think about the standard grades, the senior phase exams, a child can pass an exam at 50%. And therefore, we're getting that same mindset within our primary staff and our early broad general education stages within secondary, is that we are not looking for that 100%. So I would say that those figures are not representative of Dumfries and Galloway as they were published for the last couple of years, simply because our senior phase attainment shows that if those are correct, miracles are happening in 4, 5 and 6, because the youngsters have made huge leaps into the senior phase. So it's our job to make sure that we help and upskill our staff so that they are making confident judgments and that the data that you're presented with is reliable.
So you anticipate improvements on the data which is shown here? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Since the last time that we had a report on the collaborative, obviously sort of national policies has shifted slightly. There's not going to be an education bill in the meantime. And I know that I appreciate a lot of the work that was planned they'll try to do through the back door, if you like. I'm just wondering, where does the collaborative sit now, because there isn't going to be the sort of sweeping governance changes that there was going to be, which kind of made sort of sense to me as to why you would have the collaboratives. But I think now I'm concerned that we're not going to have the significant sort of wholesale changes in the education system that were on the horizon at the time, and that we've already heard about the cuts that we're facing. What is the role now in terms of improving education?
I think as a vehicle for collaboration and an opportunity to work across the authorities, that the idea of the regional collaboratives is certainly supporting that. I think that the days of going to large meetings in Edinburgh or Glasgow, where our authorities working with all 32 authorities are gone. We can work much more effectively in a smaller group of authorities, so that we're able to share practice, and there is a much more, I suppose it's a greater flow of information between them as to how they will unfold in the future. I'm not sure, because that hasn't been shared with us. We have taken part in the themed empowerment inspection, which is linked to the regional collaborative, and the outcome of that was very, very positive.
Katie.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points, but I'd just like to, first of all, pick up on Councillor McComb's question, and that was where Dumfries and Galloway sat in comparable with the other areas. And I couldn't really pick out your answer on that one. And I appreciate that you said that the data may not be 100%. However, if our data is not 100%, the other data and the other local authorities, is that not 100%? Because clearly looking at the graphs on page 146 and 147, Dumfries and Galloway does have, we are falling below the other authorities. So is it only our data that's not accurate, or is their data not accurate? And if none of the data is accurate, why are we being asked to look at it today? So I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that Dumfries and Galloway, according to these tables before us, there are issues that we need to address as a local authority, because I am concerned by that. My second question is in terms of, we've got a work stream progress which is from January to August 2018 and the phase 2, and I appreciate it's a high level action plan, and it's a point that got raised at EEI, and actually we had an action plan brought forward which was excellent because it actually had short term, long term, and we identified a time scale. And one of the complaints that I've had, or concerns I've had, is we're being asked to look at action plans, but there's no dates or times attached to that. And here again, we've got another, and I appreciate it's a high level, but there's no times attached to any of these. And that would be really useful in order for us to scrutinise to see, well, this is the plan, but when are we looking to meet those targets by?
Thank you, and I absolutely take your point. With regards the achievement of a level data, I agree the data does show that there are concerns, and as a result of that, we have set up excellence and equity groups in literacy and numeracy, and these are focusing in on particular interventions that we're supporting schools deliver as part of our use of PEF and our Raising Attainment agenda. The data, we are told that as an authority we are being very robust with our quality assurance and moderation. I cannot speak for the other authorities, and I don't know what they're doing, but I do know that going to the assessment coordinators meetings, that the procedures that we have put in place, that we can become more confident in the data that is presented. That's published data that goes into, that's published by the Scottish Government, so therefore it's in the public domain, which is why it's being shared with you. We looked at it across the 4 authorities because we wanted to help us benchmark where authorities were at that point in time. But there has been considerable discussion about the accuracy of it. And I apologise for you having to look at data that's not necessarily accurate, but it's what is in the public domain at the moment, and we do have to address it.
Just on that point, can I just come back, in terms of the groups that you're setting up to tackle this, can I confirm that's in secondary? Because actually it's the secondary schools that the issues are more prevalent than in the primary, and certainly that was related to at area committee level when we were looking at, our primary schools are actually doing really well, and it was a really positive report, but secondary things seem to be just slightly going down, not massively, but there's a slight, and certainly that's reflected in this data here between the primary and the secondary. So it's just to confirm that those groups are targeting secondary.
Primary and secondary they're targeting.
Can I just pick up the point regarding accuracy? I think Sheila's point is well made, just to reassure members that accuracy in teacher judgment is slightly different from accuracy in terms of the local government benchmarking indicator. So as Sheila highlights, although the S3 teacher judgment, which is a qualitative judgment of assessing progress, is a slightly different piece of information in front of you to the local government benchmarking framework data, which is the national standard, where you can see that Dumfries and Galloway is doing very well against its comparators. So it's not that the data is not robust and accurate, it's perhaps just different in terms of the judgment of our teachers in Dumfries and Galloway compared to the judgments made by teachers across Ayrshire. And it's that moderation that we're working on to make sure that we give our teachers as much confidence not to declare low, because that appears to be what our teachers are expecting of our pupils.
And in terms of the time scale for the high level action plan?
Sorry. In relation to the timescales within the action plans, we can take that to the Leeds meeting and to ask that we now tease those out so that we have a more detailed plan that will put in milestones and a better performance framework to report to.
No more indications people want to speak, so can we move to the recommendations on page 93? Can we note 2.1? 2.2 and 2.3. Thank you. So moving on to item 7 on page 157, the Northwest Community Campus update. This paper aims to provide a further update on the closure of the Northwest Community Campus and the progress towards completion of the building and the contingency that's been put in place for staff and pupils. And we have Barry Grimm, who is the Operations Manager for the Northwest Community Campus, to speak to the paper. Barry, is there anything you want to say?
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to add to the report, but I suppose that by ways of an update is that we have been working with all stakeholders and starting to plan for the move back, and for full council we'll be able to give a bit more detail in December, just getting a chance to actually speak to all of the different stakeholders and make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to be part of that process.
Members? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. I think that was an important bit. It's the only question that was really outstanding for myself was the transition coming back, obviously, how that's progressing. And if we get a fuller update, a more progressive update when at the full council on the 18th of December, then that's all very well and fine. Not hearing any nasty stories at this moment in time, so that's a really good indicator, isn't it? What a change from where it's been to where it is now, so I think you have to be congratulated on that, almost certainly. I just wonder if maybe at some point through this, is this a relevant point to pick up on the Dalbeattie stuff? Maybe leave it for yourself to decide that. I think that it's been shared around now. Maybe people have had a chance to look at it, but certainly some issues brought up by Councillor Hislop earlier. Maybe get a chance to look at that at some point. Either that or any other competent business, Chair, whatever you think is appropriate.
Just on the Northwest Community Campus, I must pay tribute to all the staff who've been involved in bringing particularly Max High campus back into use. Staff cancelled their holidays during the October period, and really it was like a scene out of a planning for a battle in terms of amount of effort that went into it. And I was really impressed by all the effort that went in, how well the council worked together in order to deliver for the pupils and the staff within the campus. So I'll give testimony to that. Paul, is there anything you want to say in terms of the work at the Northwest Campus?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of where we currently stand, we have the complete defects list, working through that with Graham's at the moment. We're approximately 65% through that list. I've been very clear with Graham's that only when all of these issues have been remedied and that the council are satisfied will we take practical completion of the building. The current intention is that work will be done in December, but again, must stress to members that only when we're 100% certain that all the work's done will we take practical completion.
In terms of the Dalbeattie campus, I don't think it's fair to actually bring this to discussion at this point, because obviously officers haven't had time to look at this. Yeah, okay, Paul, if you...
Chair, members haven't had a report on Dalbeattie Learning Campus. All I have in front of me is a list of things. I don't actually know what these things consist of. We can't discuss Dalbeattie Learning Campus without members actually having a report. If the Tories wanted to talk about Dalbeattie Learning Campus, they could have spoken to you at any point before this meeting to have arranged a report as quickly as possible on Dalbeattie Learning Campus.
Rob?
Thank you for your indulgence, Chairman, on that point. Quite clearly this has been set up to ambush you and the officers. There is no other way of putting it. And the member has said on the public record that there are problems with fire stopping in the campus. Now, naturally, as a community I'm particularly concerned with, that is now out there on the public record. We have to say something about that today, I think. Now, I deplore the fact that this has been done in the way that it is done, and I think you can guess I'm pretty angry about it. But the statement has been made.
Yeah, on that basis, Paul, do you want to respond in terms of that?
Yeah, so obviously seen this very late, but what this looks like is a list of all the service desk logs for the Dalbeattie campus. The particular reference to fire stopping is made, or was made, on the back of
some due diligence that was undertaken on the defects that were identified at the Northwest Community Campus. So we went down to Dalbeattie and looked. There were some minor fire stopping issues that were identified. Those were remedied immediately. But as part of the service desk, these are all logged. So everything you see on here is from the start of operation of the school.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll recognise why it was important, given the community interest, and the fact I'm aware that this is likely in the press as well. The member might wish to consider whether, given his lengthy experience, it was the best way that he could have raised the concerns.
I agree with you on that, and hopefully that will reassure the community that this has been addressed. Okay, Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I can understand why the administration's taken aback with this, but I think it's fair enough that the Conservative opposition have raised that. Obviously, we've been told that everything was rosy with the LGBT campus, and a quick look at it, that's maybe not an over rosy picture of LGBT. But the point I want to make is about the report here. I can't see any reference to the Southwest Hub here. They're important players in this. You think from this report that it didn't exist and they didn't have responsibilities for here. I think as a committee, we should be asking for a meeting with the Southwest Hub to see their take on what's happening here. Ask them the questions that we're all saying, why has this been allowed to happen? Why has that all been allowed to happen? I think it would be a fair discussion to have between our partners, and I think we should definitely invite them along and have a discussion about this.
Paul?
Yeah, so in regards to the Southwest Hub, the chairman of the Southwest Hub and their chief executive came down to see the chief executive and the director for corporate services along with myself. At that meeting, they gave an unreserved apology for what's happened at Northwest Community Campus. Notwithstanding that, we have got the independent review of the Northwest Community Campus, which is underway at the moment. That work's been commissioned by the Scottish Futures Trust and has been undertaken by a firm of chartered surveyors called GLM, and I understand that report's to be brought back to Council early in the new year.
Dick?
I think we've met at official level. I think we have a duty as elected members to hold them to account as well, or at least have a discussion with them. So I would like one of the recommendations that we seek a meeting with them for a full and a frank discussion.
Well, there is a report coming to full council, so I think that would be better addressed by full council, or at full council rather than at this committee. Because I think this is a problem of construction generally, not just within Dumfries and Galloway. Rob?
Chairman, thank you for your forbearance again on that very point. Our contract is with Hub Southwest. Anything we do at this point mustn't get in the way of any redress that we might or might not wish to seek at the appropriate time, both which is written into the variation that gave us beneficial occupation, or potentially any other redress that might or might not become appropriate. You'll be conscious I'm picking my words very, very carefully, but I think inviting people for a chat at this point is potentially not what we want to be doing, given the amounts of money that we may be out by the end of this and what we may have to do in order to recover them. I think we just ought to proceed carefully so far as that is concerned.
Thanks, Rob. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. I was going back just to some of the comments, but I mean, we got this very, very late in the day. Well, the first time we discussed it was about 20 past 10, I think. That's how late in the day we got it this morning. So we raised it as soon as we can at the appropriate level, this committee being that appropriate level. So we're sharing this information. We look at it in the face of it. You've had about as long to read it as what we have. Maybe we've had 10 minutes longer, as a group, that is. So I think our concerns, we've raised them. We think we've put them to the appropriate level. Paul's given us some reassurance in regards to the state of play as it stands. I mean, I missed the very last point that he missed to get absolute reassurance. That's all we're looking for as a group. And if, again, back to the point about certainly for that side of the room has raised, that if there's a real issue there, if it's fire stops, that's been addressed. That is a real concern. It's in black and white, it's in front of us. Some of it look historic. But I think we have to raise it. This is the right format in which to raise it. This is not about hijacking or anything else. This is about raising the concerns from a local ward members brought them to the group, and this is the quickest way that we could actually do it. So there was no offence meant in any way whatsoever. It's the standard procedure, the way in which we would, as an opposition group on this council, raise our issues and concerns. But I think we need absolute reassurance to maybe address that. I would support certainly the direction of travel that Councillor Brody is heading in as far as that we need to, whether it's the appropriate time now, we need to make a decision at some point that we have to address the issues in regards to what's happened as we're using South West Hub as a mechanism in which to construct new builds and lever in extra money. We have to actually look at that seriously, because on the face of it doesn't look like it's worked very well at all.
Well, I think this will be covered by the investigation to a large extent. And as I say, it's not just a problem for Dumfries and Galloway in the South West Hub, it seems to be across the country. And I'm sure it will be subjected to a national review. Jim McComb?
Thank you, Chair. 3.7.3. I note that we will be claiming for the costs of the decant and the costs of refurbishment of Maxwellton High School. I assume the staff costs involved in the fault-finding exercise will also be claimed for.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there will be. Yeah.
Okay, so can we move to the recommendations? Adam?
Sorry, I did have my hand up. I think after Councillor Crothers saying that they got this late in the day, I mean, wasn't that much late in the day. They had enough time to talk to the press about it in the meantime. I think that this isn't this. No, my understanding is that they have spoke to the press already about this, and Conservative councillors are also able to have discussions with yourself outside of this committee meeting. They're also able to have discussions and meetings with council officers and kind of raise these issues. Bringing it up first time at a SYPLL committee meeting is not the way to go about these things. I'm concerned about the list
Chairman, this is outrageous. Why do you allow this?
I'm concerned about the list of issues that are here, although my understanding from Paul is that these are routine incidents that have been reported and being dealt with in a proactive way, and that could be done anywhere across the school.
Can we put that to one side now? That's obviously beyond what we're actually discussing in this paper. Okay, so can we move to the recommendations? Are members happy with the recommendations as outlined in section 2? Okay, thank you. So if we move to item 8 on page 163. Apologies, members, my briefing notes are all out of phase. An update on the decentralisation of the music instruction service was requested at the SYPLL committee in September. This paper outlines the progress to date. Area models are in their infancy, and the area coordinators are being appointed to work with communities, schools, parents and pupils to develop an area plan for music. The plan is to set out the vision for area provision within the current budget and includes plans to generate income. The regional coordinator will support the area coordinators, monitor plans and have overall responsibility for the quality of provision. As area plans evolve, each is likely to be different as the skills and expertise in the community will vary. It's supposed to provide an update to area committees, and we have Liz Baxter and Julian will refresh me now.
Kate Picken and Jim Brown to answer questions to the report.
Thanks, Julie. Is there anything you want to add to the report?
Yes, so an update on the appointments. We have preferred candidates for the regional coordinator we interviewed last week, and we also have preferred candidates for Annandale and Eskdale, Nithsdale and the Stewartry. We are re-advertising the Wigtonshire. So that's an update on so far.
Thanks, Liz. Members? Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Whenever music service comes up, I've always got questions, and certainly I was really disappointed to be reading this paper, and I appreciate that the work, and I want to thank the officers for the work. Looking at the budgets over the last 5 years, they've halved, and the amount of pupils doing music has halved, and that makes me really sad. I don't hide the fact that my son got free music lessons in primary 5. He got the free music with the strings works in primary 5. He then got free music lessons in primary 6. And at the end of primary 7, he auditioned for the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and he got in. And had it not been for those free music lessons, he would not have been in that position. And I'm so upset at the fact that there's so many children out there that have the potential, and we're missing them. And it comes down to budgets, and I appreciate that the work that the officers are doing with that. But looking at the report ahead, I understand that we'll get a report or we're being asked to approve reports to Area Committee. Within that report, can we please have comparison to how our areas are doing across the region? So in SIPL, we have how we're doing I'll use my own example in Wigtonshire, and how we compare with other areas in Dumfries and Galloway. And I'm really disappointed to hear that the post in Wigtonshire is having to be re-advertised again. Can I just confirm that post, it's got 0.2, so does that equate to 1 day a week that the children are going to have that support? And with the help from ward workers, is that correct, that they will support them? Thank you. In terms of sort of specifics, on the report we have the Creative Scotland funding, and we've got digital music technology. Now, in Stranraer and Wigtonshire, that table on page 171 is sitting at 0. Now, my understanding is at the Douglas Stewart, there was over £1 million spent in upgrading the music facilities. We've got incredible dance studio. I walked in and my mouth hit the ground. It's fantastic. However, my concern is it's not being used. We've got recording studios, I was told, in the Douglas Stewart, but it appears to not be being used. So how can we ensure the community can actually access that? Because I'm also aware that there's a survey going out through the Newton Stewart Traditional Music Festival, who are trying to create a music hub in Newton Stewart because they're well aware of the lack of facilities. But one of their questions and one of their hopes that they're trying to do is to create a recording studio. Now, we have a recording studio in Newton Stewart, and the fact that other organisations are trying to apply for funding and looking at projects when we have facilities. So what are we doing in terms of an overall view as to ensure that the communities can use these facilities that we've spent a lot of money and time and energy getting? How can we use it?
Our digital music software programme is used in primaries, so the primary children don't have access to the recording unit at the secondary schools. So we have tutors that go into schools and use it's called the Magic Music Maker programme software, and these schools are identified in this region in the three areas. But our budget goes back in March, and I'm always looking at the spread and where that project should potentially move to. So quite often music projects go in a rolling programme, so there's nothing to say that next year we'll be offering that to the Wigtonshire and Stranraer. They already have all the classroom teachers, schools in Wigtonshire and Stranraer have access to Charanga, which is underneath that digital music technology project as well. So all the class teachers have had staff training in Charanga, which is our online music programme, and that's going down very well. So my intention would be to offer a similar music project in music technology and Magic Music Maker in the other area next year. Thank you.
Just on that point, you're saying that the primary teachers are going to be get training in how to use that.
Yes.
But one of the questions I've been contacted by constituents is, where are specialist music teachers in primary? And, again, I understand that there's cuts, but this does go down to the point raised previously that the teachers are being asked to do more and more with less. And actually to now say, actually, you have to be a specialist in music because we don't have specialist teachers going into our schools. So can I put a request in that at the area committee report, we actually get a detail of what music specialists we're getting in each primary? Because, understand that, if we don't know what's going on, we can't then improve on what we have got.
Can I just say about Whittonshire that in the meantime, when we haven't got an area coordinator, the senior music instructor will take on that role until the appointment is made. And also, part of the decentralisation is to put it to the areas so that we can use all the facilities with the people who are skilled in the areas to deliver the service to all our youngsters. And I have with me today Mr. Brown from Annan Academy, who has already started to think about plans for Annandale and Eskdale, and I think you're going to talk briefly about that. Speak.
Thank you, Liz. Members, Chair. I think I totally agree with you, Councillor. The impact that music has on young people is phenomenal. And if we look at 21st century skills, the skill base that the government is looking at, it certainly is about creativity and mental health, well-being, confidence, resilience, and so on and so forth. So I'm in absolute agreement with you about the urgent need to make sure we safeguard this service. I think I share also your concerns, but I think looking forward to the model you've helped us describe, that gives a much greater level of local autonomy over what will happen. It helps to articulate between primary and secondary, and helps to articulate between our music services and that beyond Dumfries and Galloway. So I'm certainly very, very optimistic, very positive that this will not only increase footfall, it will also increase the profile of music in the region. So from my point of view, I'm very, very optimistic and positive about moving forward with this.
Just Jim.
Thanks, Chair. I note in 3.9, musical instruments have been allocated to community groups. My question is, what part do these community groups play in youth music education?
They're very vital. In fact, in some areas, the brass band provides all our brass tuition, particularly in the Stranraer area and in Nithsdale and in Upper Nithsdale. So they borrow our instruments to teach our children out with school hours and charge them a very small fee to do that.
Are there formal links between the community groups and the youth music service?
We are working towards that, and when I had my engagement sessions last year to think about the way forward, many of the community groups attended those meetings.
Just speaking to the acting director, I think what might be useful is if we have a member seminar on the community use of assets within our schools, obviously in terms of the music facilities and all the other facilities which we have within these amazing new schools which you have within the area. So perhaps that's something which we could organise for the new year. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I think that's a good idea. I'm just a big supporter of this whole principle as well when it comes to music and all the benefits that can be had from that have already been outlined. But see on page 173, we've got Appendix 4 there. And it looks, just on the face of that, I wonder if it could be explained away, but it looks like it's more benefits for less money, it looks like, potentially in the west of the region compared to the east of the region. I wonder if that's the case or not. Is that just a simple way of looking at it? Could be geographically, there's far more locations in Annandale and Eskdale, you could say, to Wigtonshire. That's obviously got a cost more and so on and so forth. But I just wonder, am I reading that completely wrongly? Big supporter of this, to say the least. But am I reading that completely wrongly, just when you look at the figures that are coming out of that table?
Yes.
Well, the figures are based on what we have now. So as we move to a different model, it could look different depending on what the areas put into their plans. But the reason for putting this appendix in is for making it transparent, open and transparent, so that each area can challenge each other. Because when the teachers themselves had a look at this, they were saying, what are they doing in Annandale and Eskdale that we're not doing? And that makes us challenge and question each other to find out what each area is doing.
Okay, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and we agreed 2.5. Yep. Oh yes, Lucy's just reminded me an additional recommendation that we hold a members' seminar in the new year about the community use of assets within the education, or the CYPLL brief. Jim?
Chair, can I just...
Will that include how we actually engage with the respective communities and what the links with the schools are?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah.
And maybe where the instruments are as well, and what instruments are available, because it would be nice if we knew that links were actually being made. And you offered a couple of examples, as I'm sure there are dozens of others.
We have all that information available.
So moving on to item 9 on page 175, the bridge, Dumfries Learning Town. The opportunities and change that the bridge will bring have always been central to the thinking of Dumfries Learning Town. We are pleased the building is now complete and handed to the council. The bridge is beginning to draw national attention, particularly after the publication of the 15 to 24 Learner Journey Review. It shows this council to have been visionary in what senior phase schooling needs to look like to meet the needs of employees and the opportunities for developing young workforce. This paper sets out the position and steps we will take over the next quarter. And we have, Gillian, to speak to this paper. Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Members, there are 3 work streams at the moment, and I know that Richard and Paul are also with us, so depending on your questions today, we can direct them related to the learning and teaching offer at the bridge, the building of the bridge, and the development of the operational function of the bridge and the Bridge Educational Trust. Work has progressed very well, and I'm pleased to bring this report to members, which sets out that the building is now complete. We are working now to arrange the Bridge Educational Trust governance arrangements, and the paper asks members to accept a further report in March, which details more, setting out the agreed partnerships, curricular opportunities and the operating arrangements. But we felt it was important at this juncture to bring a paper to you to confirm that the building is complete and work has progressed well.
Ivor?
Chair, I was at a meeting last night of Peace and Parents where we were told that the building wasn't complete, and that's why we weren't actually in the bridge to have a look round. What is the state of play when we have this paper in front of us today saying it is complete but are minor snagging issues? Are any of these minor snagging issues fire related?
Paul?
Thanks, Chair. Absolutely not. The snagging issues that are currently being worked through at the bridge are purely of a decorative nature, and these will be finished hopefully this week.
Yeah, and I can confirm I went around the bridge with Elaine and Ronnie last week, and that was the only work which was being done was in terms of touching up decorations, etc. Ronnie?
When we were there, I was very impressed with the quality of the work there, the building itself and the scope within that for different uses. But when I was there was somebody doing a video of the building. It might be worthwhile if we could get that video and show it to the Education Committee, and that's everybody there can have a look at it and see what's went on there. The other thing is that the bridge has always been for not just Dumfries, that area, it's for other communities. I believe there's been an interest from, it's Cast Douglas Way or something like that, for different people to try and get some input into there and try and get some things done in that in the bridge. And I just, we don't want to lose sight of that as well, because it's a part of Dumfries Learning Town, but it's always been for others as well, and we don't want to lose that.
Thank you. I was rummaging there. I do have the film. I was handed a copy of it last night. So if we have the technology, it's certainly something we can either play at the end of committee today, or we could play at another point. But we do have a fly through off the bridge. The meeting that was available, the meeting that we had last night was a very well attended meeting. There was about 800 people, probably 600 people, 800 people there last night. And the reason we did not hold it at the bridge was because we were not confident that we had the operating arrangements for such a large scale number of people at relatively short notice to the building reaching completion. So I did say that the building wasn't ready, but it wasn't complete. It was not, we were not ready to accept such a large number of people to attend an event at an early stage in its opening.
So I think it would be a good idea, since we do have the video.
Perhaps we could, if I may, I could perhaps check with colleagues that the audio visuals will work as we move through the agenda, and we could perhaps play it at the end. That be suitable?
Happy with that? Yep. Okay. Right, so can we move to the recommendations on this particular item agenda? So can we note 2.1? Can we agree 2.2? And can we agree to receive a further report to this committee in the March meeting? Thank you. Members, moving on to item 10 on page 179, Education Support Services. This paper provides an overview to date of parental involvement and engagement, reflecting our service delivery plans into the National Improvement Framework, and as a response to the Scottish Government's Learning Together National Action Plan on Parental Involvement, Engagement, Family Learning at Home 2018 to 2021. Draft documents will be brought back to CYPLL Committee for approval post-consultation and engagement with parent councils and parent forums in 2019. So we have Vanessa Morris to speak to the paper. Is there anything you want to add to the paper, Vanessa?
No, I don't have anything to add to the paper at this time, except to say that we are working closely with two key organisations in Dumfries and Galloway. One is the Dumfries and Galloway Parent Council Forum, which is an independent body from the authority, and also with the new addition of membership for our parent councils of Connect. We have through that provided very good independent framework to support parent councils in their work in engaging with the wider parent forum. On top of that, though, I would also like to say that this work sits alongside our developing work around resolution work with parents around complaints, and actually working in a collaboration with our parents to try and address concerns that they may have out with formal complaint processes by looking at our existing policies that we have in place and making those more user-friendly and accessible to our parents across Dumfries and Galloway. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. Members? John?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on page 186, 3.14, the locally elected members who are members of school parent councils have got to be co-opted. Is that correct?
Each parent council obviously is an independent organisation, and they have within the Act the opportunity to co-opt members. Those could be elected members, they could also be representatives from local businesses, they could be grandparents, they could be anybody from the community. But they do have the opportunity to co-opt elected members onto their parent council.
Yeah, thank you for that. So it just means that elected members need to be asked to become part of a parent council.
Yes, but as I say, that decision is from the parent council to have that engagement with their elected members or with their local community.
Mel?
Never done that before, first time. Just to clarify a little bit more, the parent councils can invite elected members to become a member of the parent council, but all parent council meetings are open to the public. You don't have to be a member of the parent council to attend a meeting. You can just go along. Just one more thing. I'd just like to say thank you to Vanessa and the team for working on these documents. They've worked closely with the Regional Parent Forum, and it's looking really good, and there's a lot of engagement, and we're doing all we can as a forum to get the information out there and send it to everybody we can to make sure that there's as many people as possible involved in the consultation on these documents, and it's very much appreciated.
Thanks, Mel. Dick?
Thanks, Chair. It's a question about the school's relationships with parents. There's a lot of training given to teachers about how to deal with children's needs and resolving conflicts and getting on well with them. But I've got some parents in my ward where the relationship between the school and the parent has been very, very poor, and it's led to children losing out in education because they're out of school for months and months. So what training is given to teachers and managers in the schools to develop good relationships with parents, to resolve troubles before they even start, and avoid conflicts?
There are programs of professional development across all of our schools, and that does form part of our training for teachers. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that we are looking at in terms of this complaints process or mediation is, again, on the parental involvement webpage that's now been set up. We've created a document and a process which is called Ask Us to Look Again, and that is about encouraging parents to have those conversations with their class teacher or with their head teacher, and if you're unable to resolve or reach an understanding, I think there are big challenges around communication, then there's now an opportunity to come to the education support services and actually ask us to work on those relationships between parent and the professional in the school. One of the barriers, I think, from looking in terms of the complaints process back to parental involvement and engagement is around some of the language that we use within education. That language is very important, and we don't want to not use that with parents because it's important that they understand the terms used in education. But maybe some further work on explaining those needs to be undertaken by ourselves as an authority, but actually by co-producing those definitions with parents. And I'm working with one group at the moment in Dumfries, who are a group who work with children who have autism needs. And they are helping to write some of those new definitions from their perspective. And I think that's important because we're all here to support children and young people, but sometimes that message gets lost in some of the language which we use.
Thanks, Vanessa. Oh, Katie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going through this just now, and I'm really conscious of the fact that we're in Year of the Young People, and our young people have been really empowered this last 12 months, and we're taking that forward with our Youth Council, which is going to be, I think, a real asset to our council. And there's lots of discussion about parents and teachers and officers, but there's not a great voice coming through on this document that we're producing about really valuing that young person's voice. And I do note that it's mentioned that pupil representation may be invited to attend meetings, but they're not an integral part of the parent council. And should they, I guess is my question. And also on this, we've got 3.14, locally elected members. So it made reference there. Is that regional, or is that going to be our youth elected members? Because we're going to have locally elected youth council members. So will they fit into that category as well?
Right, so to clarify a couple of points there, completely agree about that triangle between pupil voice, parent and the teaching professionals. Again, in education support services, we have had and identified that as an area for development. And what we have suggested to our secondary schools at this stage is that we develop pupil council network through GLOW across Dumfries and Galloway. So that is something that we have identified to mirror that parent council structure. Coming to your second point, I've lost, which is terrible, sorry. Youth Council, thank you. Because parent councils are independent organisations, these documents provide that framework. So what we can do as a local authority is to suggest that actually that pupil voice should be a regular part of any parent forum. Obviously, head teachers as leaders of learning in the school have their own pupil engagement forums, and that will feed through in their school improvement planning and in their school improvement plans. So in some respects, these documents we are putting in place to guide and support our parent councils, but we also have to acknowledge that actually it will be down to every individual parent council to decide if they co-opt community members or elected members, or if they have as a regular agenda item the voice of young people on their parent council. We can only recommend.
Could I make a suggestion that when we put this out to the pupil forums, or to the parent councils, that we ask them to explore that option?
That can be done, and there's engagement ongoing over the next few weeks, so I will make sure that that is raised.
Thank you, members. I've got nobody indicating they want to speak, so can we move to the recommendations on... Oh, sorry, Robert.
There we go. The communication between parents and schools is greatly enhanced by that important line, all parents should be provided with a named contact person. So if the parents know the name of that person, the contact in school, and establish a link and a relationship with that person, I think it does aid communication considerably. So I was very glad to see that under paragraph 21. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Moving to the recommendations, can we note 2.1? And in terms of 2.2, can I suggest an amendment? And as far as it should now, I think, read the authority support for parent councils and their role as a representative body for all the parents in school at 3.5 to 3.16, because obviously it extends beyond section 3.5, and that the new draft scheme for the establishment of parent councils will come back to this committee for approval. The other drafts are coming back, so that one should as well. Yep.
Could I suggest that all of these draft documents come back perhaps when we present the Education Authority annual plan, as this will lead into the reporting on the NIF as part of that?
To do that. So can we note 2.3 with the correction that it's say committee rather than omittee, and 2.4. Yeah. Members? Yeah. Okay, members, agenda item 11 on page 291, Wi-Fi upgrade to secondary schools, update November 2018. You recall in the 2018-19 budget setting process, members agreed £1.8 million of investment over a 2-year period, being 900,000 in each year, in order to replace the existing wireless infrastructure within secondary schools. This project will enable learners to make the most of the opportunities technology can provide, and provide the further opportunity to release the benefits of bring your own device, to allow staff and pupils to use their personally owned devices within the learning and teaching environment of the school. This project will be delivered successfully under budget using the allocation from year one only, i.e. £900,000. And within the paper itself, there is a table showing out the rollout of the programme, and I note we're practically at the tail end of that. So we have Anne Harris to speak to it. Is there anything you want to add, Anne?
No, just any questions around the technology, I'm happy to take.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of little questions. On page 292, we've got the list of when these the planned installations. I was wondering if we are all on track for that. Members from Nith and Locker Ward have an event at Dumfries High School tomorrow. It'd be really good if that question was asked, if we had up-to-date information. And also on the covering page of 291, I'm always rather uncomfortable with the phrase bring your own device with the levels of poverty in the region. You know, it may leave some young people out or make it very obvious that young people have got challenges at home. With the surplus that we have due to this obvious underspend, is there an opportunity to explore the option that these funds or some of these funds could go towards providing for the school devices? That's it. Thank you.
The first point you made was, yes, we are on track. As far as the schedule is concerned, we are halfway through with Douglas Stewart happening tonight. We're having to do it out with, obviously, school hours to make sure that there's no impact on learning and teaching. The two Dumfries high schools, Dumfries High and the Academy, are due next week, beginning of next week, so we're probably going to miss your event.
It would still be good to have that information if we'd asked why have we not got good Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we made a commitment that we would leave the Dumfries schools until last and come in the way, so that's what we committed to do. Okay. Bring your own device. Once the schools have the upgraded Wi-Fi, we will be able to provide bring your own device. And that means something different in every local authority. So here we want to be able to, it'll have less of an impact on, we stopped doing refresh to our schools because we didn't have the funds to do that. So there'll be less of a budget pressure on school devices, but there will always be a device in the school that a child can use, no matter whether they're able to bring their own in or not. It'll bring benefits such as being able to take homework home instead of in paper form. They can take it home on their device. We can cast in the classrooms 2 devices, but again, should the child not have their own device, that they will have a school device there, a laptop.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's just, I'm aware that one of the questions may come of why have other local authorities given the schools iPads and we don't have them and such like. And I do know that already the young people are looking up specific things to do with their courses on their phones, ones that have got phones, and using all the data. So that will be wonderful that they won't have to use their data when they're in school. But it's just this, if there's enough devices, or if we're adding to it, or is this within the school? Is that within their budget themselves to provide the devices? Just a little bit of clarity, just.
Yeah. Once we have the upgraded Wi-Fi, we have a rollout plan for tablets and iPads, because lots of schools have been asking for these, and we've been able to provide them, but they haven't been able to use the Wi-Fi because obviously they can't get onto the curricular network. So with this upgraded Wi-Fi, they'll be able to do that. So each school have already submitted orders on tablets and predominantly Apple devices, so iPads.
Thank you. That's a good update to give them tomorrow.
Mel?
Yeah, it was just to ask, are you waiting for all of the schools to have the equipment in place before you release passwords? I know that St Joe's has got all the equipment and everything's blinking, but they don't have any passwords.
Yes, Dalbeattie campus and St Joe's already have the technology to be able to have bring your own device. We've pulled together a policy which the senior management teams in both of those schools are looking at, so we need to have the policy signed off because there will be sort of an impact on what does bring your own device mean, and we need sort of parents to understand what that is and sign up to it.
David?
Thanks, Chair. I've had issues with broadband, so technology is not my theme. Have you got a guarantee that you will have the required service at every school from the supplier? And I've just forgot what I was going to ask you there. If you could answer that here for us, please.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And every high school, not every school, because this was only for secondary schools. So by the end of the rollout programme, every high school will have upgraded bandwidth, upgraded Wi-Fi, which will enable us to bring your own device.
I've come in mind of what it was. I don't know if you've read the audit report that was sent out by the Chief Exec. There's one wee sentence of about half a dozen words, and by God has it annoyed me. It's a comment about Wi-Fi. You have about 2 megabits in Dumfries and Galloway. That's all you need to provide a service or do your work. And I thought that was an absolute disgrace. There's places in Dumfries and Galloway that haven't even got the service. So are you guaranteed that you can provide that service? And will it be available to other people? You know how sometimes you get a spread of the Wi-Fi, albeit it's supposed to be in the centre, but it could be available other places.
The upgrade to the secondary schools will enable us to broadcast obviously more than just curricular. So if we carry on with in the report I've mentioned the new technology, SD-WAN technology. That's almost like in simplistic terms, it's a router that's placed in the school, and we will be able to have bring your own device. So this router, if you come in with your device to the school, so if you're a corporate officer and you try and access your device, it'll pick up that you're looking for the corporate network and route you to that. Or if you're looking for public access, so if we have a public event on or parents come into the school, it'll automatically pick you up and divert you through to a public network. So it will enable us to use schools in a completely different way than we do at the moment. So local groups, community groups can use schools and have access to Wi-Fi.
I'm surprised you didn't get your fingers crossed.
A little faith, David. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really welcomed that we're upgrading the systems, and having spoken to the youth team in the Douglas Stewart, I know that was one of their concerns, that actually at the drop-in, when they're encouraging children to come and use the youth services, they're so frustrated because the children can't get on access to their phones, and that's actually one of the drawbacks for having the services within the school. So it's going to be really welcome to have that. I do have a concern about the bring your own device, and I wonder if that's age limited. And I speak from personal experience of a 12-year-old who's just started in first year and trying to get them off devices. And when they're being encouraged to take devices into school, I spoke, previously about the music, and I'm really proud of my son. And that might be he's done well because I do limit how much device time he has. So when you're talking about bringing your devices into school, is this for the senior phase pupils, or is this right from first year that we're encouraging children to bring in iPads? And because certainly in first year there's a fierce amount of competitiveness, especially within some of the boys, where they want to have the best, and I do really worry about this. So are we looking at this for third year and up, or the senior phase, or is this straight from first year that will be encouraging children to bring in their own devices?
Again, I think that's for each school to manage. I mean, I was asked to ensure that we had the infrastructure to be able to provide bring your own device, and we'll have a standard policy that schools will sign up to. But it would up to each classroom and up to each school as to how they manage that.
Richard?
Right. The question, yes, it's a really good news story that we're doing things within budget. That's really good. It doesn't say whether this is this a revenue budget or capital budget, and will it be less money to find in cuts for next year?
I think it's capital.
It's capital budget, yeah. Capital.
And yes, hopefully it will mean there's less cuts to find for next year. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I assume there are similar plans for our primary schools.
There are no plans for the primary schools because the funding that we received was just for secondary schools. We've been able to manage that within year one's allocated resource. We'd love to be able to use year two's money to do primary schools, but again, that would be up to committee to decide whether that was feasible or not. But the funding for year one was only for the upgrade to secondary schools.
Thank you, Chair. It certainly looks like a good news story. Just wondering, I suppose from a technical point of view, what difference has it made from what we've had to what it is now? I know you've touched on some of it already, but I suppose in the hardware, is it better coverage? What else can you do as a pupil? What's the difference in speeds? And I think, going back to, I see this as a capital investment, so we're making a difference. I think the council make a difference through that. Wonder, does it come back to this committee? Would it go back through the budget process? And is there a revenue consequence, positive or negative? Sounds like it's probably a positive revenue consequence for what you're saying there. So maybe less money needing to be spent in regards to Wi-Fi, but I wonder just if we get a status on that as well.
As far as the costs are concerned, if we adopt the SD-WAN technology, which I've included in the report, this has a knock-on effect on. We purchased this through the SWAN framework, and our SWAN costs for bandwidth are hugely expensive. Last year's the budget that I had last year, we used the majority of that to upgrade 47 primary schools so that they had acceptable bandwidth speeds, and that was just over 200,000 just for that. We didn't have any other funding to do anything else in schools. So by using this SD-WAN technology, it's a lot more cost effective and we'll be getting better value for money.
I suppose just interested in the coverage and the speeds as well, beyond the costs, and if we've got any indication of what that is. If not, I can catch it offline. Okay.
The wireless access points that we're replacing are most of our schools will see a significant difference in the speed of the Wi-Fi. It is a like-for-like replacement, so areas of schools that don't have Wi-Fi currently wasn't part of the scope, so it's a like-for-like replacement, but the speeds will be considerably faster.
Members, can we turn to the recommendations, recognising that this is a very good news item as far as we've completed the work, slightly behind schedule, but for understandable reasons, but well within budget. So can we agree the recommendation is laid out at item 2? Okay. Thanks. Okay, members, can we move to item 12 on page 295, report of the views of LGBT young people in Dumfries and Galloway on inclusive education. Following a notice of motion to a full meeting of Dumfries and Galloway Council in December 2017, a working group of young people was established to consult on inclusive education. The working group worked alongside LGBT Youth Scotland. The report gives members the view of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender young people in Dumfries and Galloway on how inclusive they feel the Council's education system is. It's linked closely to the Time for Inclusive Education, the TIE campaign, which is a Scottish campaign founded in June 2015. Has one very simple aim: to combat homophobia, biphobia and transphobia with inclusive education. The TIE campaign believes in an education system which is inclusive and free of prejudice for lesbian, gay, bisexual or transgender youth, and are lobbying decision makers in order to achieve this. Dumfries and Galloway Council is committed to ensuring progress in achieving the TIE campaign aims. It's accelerated by ensuring the recommendations in this report are implemented as soon as possible. Although the TIE campaign has recently gained support from the Scottish Government, Dumfries and Galloway Council are keen to take more immediate measures to improve the experience of LGBT young people in our schools and not wait for the legislation to come into force. And we have Mark and Hugh to speak. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think the report speaks for itself. The only comment I'd make, Chair, is that we deliberately took an approach of having this led by a group of young people locally who are affected directly by some of the issues within it. And the report that's within this is at the end of that work, but it's also really important, I think, to acknowledge the relationship that the Council has with LGBT Youth Scotland, who are our main local partner for delivery of LGBT services, and they've been critical to the delivery of what's presented to members today. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chair. I want to thank Mark and his team for helping young people to pull this report together. It does make for a little bit of uneasy reading in some places, but I think it's important to recognise the work that our schools have done to date, and that will only, the pace of that work will only accelerate now, even before legislation comes into place. So, thanks for doing this work, and I think that it's just really important that we get on and support the recommendations today and push that through so we can see that work increase into all of our schools and make that vital difference that's needed.
Thanks, Adam. Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. Page 298. The schools in the authority are proactive in tackling homophobia, biphobia and transphobia through an inclusive education approach including timetable and prejudice-based bullying. Now, I applaud this commitment and the commitment to Mark and his team, because I know how hard they work with the young people. And even though that this is happening, sadly, we know that bullying is still happening within this young community. But from different schools that I go to and different people that I speak with, and I know many LGBT and trans young people, and their experience seems to be different. And I was wondering if there is like any regional research to know whether it's regional based, whether it's just happens to be kids at a specific school are a bit more open-minded and cooler than some other kids, or whether it's schools, some schools have a better policy. You know, if there is a successful method in some places, it would be great that they shared with other ones and stuff. So is there this joined up approach, Mark, on, you know, the schools, or is there any research to show whether it's region-based, area-based or whatever?
Okay, I think I'll leave you to answer the specifics about schools to go ahead, but in terms of what's presented to members today, we very deliberately involved young people from across the region because it was very important that this was not skewed towards a certain community. So there's a lot. That's part of the reason why it's took nearly a year to get back to committee, and also within the appendix, the work that LGBT Youth Scotland have done in terms of their ongoing school surveys. I think that gives a breadth of information which shows that this is, you know, where there is issues, it's not necessarily specific to a specific school, it's more general across the region, and the experiences of young people can be very different depending on their very personal circumstance. I think you know, if you like, you can extrapolate the findings across the region, and we've also done that deliberately at points to make sure that it was not identifying of any individual young person or group of young people within a community as well. But I think you'll maybe talk specifically about any specific school.
We don't actually have any specific data on schools, and I suppose that your experience probably reflects where we are, and the work that's referenced in the report from 3-4 onwards highlights the need to bring some more consistency across the piece. That we've been working very closely with Respect Me, who have developed the new anti-bullying guidance for Scotland on behalf of the Government and Education Scotland. That is an approach that is very much based in the community of the school. It's not a top-down approach, and that's been a very interesting and different experience for us all, in that it's about the school and the community, including obviously the students and the parents and the staff, in terms of developing what are their issues, responding to those issues, and developing their anti-bullying policy to deal with that. So I think that that's about acknowledging that not all schools and not all communities are in the same place across Scotland, and sadly not in the same place in terms of Dumfries and Galloway. But that's the work that's ongoing, and we have an implementation plan in terms of being able to do that. In terms of data going forwards, we now have the CMIS module for bullying to be able to capture, and we're required to be able to capture all incidents of bullying and be able to identify if that's LGBT related. So I think that will start to give us more information, which will then, of course, create that cycle of being able to have those conversations with schools and their communities about what are those issues, reviewing those anti-bullying policies, but also obviously with the work that are being recommended for yourselves to consider in terms of how we work with schools about improving but building their confidence in terms of being able to address some of these issues and engage their students and their communities in the conversation about these issues.
Sorry, thanks for that, Hugh. That's fantastic. Just sort of going back, are the schools sort of working together as well? You know, sort of, because as I said, I've found some schools are doing fantastic and some schools are struggling with the issue. Through no fault of anyone's own, you know, it's just, you know, I don't know whether it's the school that's getting it right or whether the kids are just different. You know, it's a difficult one. But are the school, you know, the teachers or the head teacher, whatever, all communicating to come with an approach that fits everyone, you know, that works?
Through our primary and secondary strategy groups, the head teachers will come together, and through the clusters they'll have those conversations, and we've presented and signed off on the anti-bullying approach, which includes LGBT there. I mean, I would anticipate that the implementation group that we're looking at will absolutely be where is it working best, where are our champions, because absolutely peer support will be the way to be able to shift if we have to shift. I think the evidence is that we're all moving in the same direction. I just think we need to speed up. Clearly, some of the concerns that were highlighted by young people in the report means that we need to move fast on this. So it will be really down to the implementation team to be able to grab those examples of good practice, to bring in those colleagues, and to be able to, with young people, to be able to communicate those back to all schools. So it's a peer approach, I think.
Katie?
Thank you for that, and thank you to the team for pulling this together. I'm delighted to see this here today, and I think it's really important that it is here today. Specifically, 3.19 on page 297 says that the local authority should record specific incidents of homophobic, biphobic, transphobic bullying in schools on the system that we have. And certainly I am aware, and it's not something I'm pleased to hear, but I am aware that young people still use language as a weapon within our schools. So I think this is fantastic that we now have the ability to record this as such, because my understanding is that currently any bullying around these issues doesn't get recorded. So I really welcome the fact that we're taking this forward. I also would like to just welcome the fact that we appear to be going forward as a strategy across the region. On page 308, we have schools that are doing things in our region. I noticed the Douglas Ewart isn't on there. However, I am aware that the Douglas Ewart do have an LGBT group that meets. They don't fit into this criteria for whatever reason, but I do welcome the fact that we're going to be taking that forward. In terms of the other recommendations, we're on 298, the third bullet point down, or it's actually the second on that page, but it says all head teachers are to attend awareness training. Now, where there's a vacancy for a head teacher, who would fill that role? Would it go to the guidance teachers, or where there's an acting head teacher? Is that part of our head teachers training that you're envisaging? Because actually quite often it's the guidance teachers, or it's the named teacher that the parents could contact that might be most beneficial for this training. As I say, it references the head teachers, but what happens where perhaps we don't have a head teacher or acting head teacher?
I'm thinking of a circumstance where we don't have a head teacher, and I'm not quite sure, but if we have an acting head, the expectation would be that it's the senior management team that would be taking on that, but which would be, I think, from the young people's view, would be that the head teacher as the head of the school needs to set the tone, needs to set the expectations. So I think we would be looking again how we do that, and again that would be for the implementation plan in terms of at what point, but the more we can get the message out and get people the access to the opportunities about the raising awareness, I think whether they're acting or not, they're likely to at some point already be in a management position. So it would be time well spent.
Thank you for that. And I just want to also say thank you that we will have a voice on the Youth Council that I've already previously mentioned, that there will be representation from LGBTIQ, all the identified people on that. Thank you.
No, just going to say that there are many, of course, other forms of bullying in schools. Kids are incredibly inventive on finding ways of bullying. So I'd just like to see LGBT bullying as part of a bigger context of anti-bullying strategy and policy within schools policy. That's helpful, I think.
Timothy?
Thank you, Chair. I read this report with a lot of interest, and I found it very moving, in fact. I don't know if all members are aware that teaching religious and moral areas includes relationship, education, issues related to human sexuality and so forth in denominational schools are the area of the curriculum that remains under the direction, control of the church, and the bishops of Scotland, as far as the whole Catholic sector in Scotland is concerned, confide that production of educational materials and so forth to the Scottish Catholic Educational Service. And SCES, the SCES as it tends to be referred to, has been producing materials in this area to support anti-discrimination and anti-bullying, indeed, as Robert said, in all areas as well, and also training material for teachers. And I was talking to the Bishop just in the last day or two, Bishop William Nolan, Bishop of Galloway, whom I represent, and he wanted to make it clear very much that his aim and his aspiration for Catholic education in the diocese was to achieve the Christian aims of justice and peace for all.
Thank you, Timothy.
Chair, it's with regard to some of the findings on page 312. We seem to have a situation where the respondents feel that we're not doing enough to tackle the homophobia, biphobia, etc. However, teachers have been receiving enough relevant training. Is there a disconnect between what's happening and what's perceived to be happening? You know, are we actually getting it right, the right training to the teachers, or is there something we should be doing differently to actually allow them to tackle the issue so that the kids feel that it is being tackled at secondary, rather than a case of they think the teachers are getting the proper training, but actually it's not the proper training?
I think within the findings on page 312, there's a few points within that which do contradict a wee bit in terms of how young people view, and that was something that we took quite a bit of time over analysing to make sure that was accurate. And the data that's within that is robust in terms of the findings. I think it's now up to the implementation team to maybe look further working with some of the young people who were involved in this group to take this forward and actually try and understand that a bit better in terms of then developing an action plan that we can take forward to make sure that the young people feel as though that, you know, they are safe and included within the school environment. But I think it is fair to say that some of the results do contradict a wee bit, but it's certainly a true and accurate reflection of the young people's views.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just currently ask, obviously we've got on the report here on page 297, there was a report to ministers in August, and there was the announcement made on the 8th of November by the Deputy First Minister recommending that the tie campaign aims are taken forward. Now, obviously, we as a local authority have been working on this prior to this announcement being made. How do those two systems work together? Because obviously we as a local authority have come together with a super amount of information and a plan going forward, but obviously there was an announcement made at government level. So, you know, is there correlation between the two? Is there going to be more information coming?
Certainly during the course of this work, we did engage with the tie campaign nationally, and they were very positive around the work that was happening within Dumfries and Galloway, but ultimately one of their main aims was about changing legislation, which the government has now indicated will happen, and within that, I actually took the time because we were in a position where this committee report was actually written, and then it came, and I was surprised when I was driving home in the news to hear that the government were about to legislate on it. So I can assure you the next day we took quite a bit of time to match up what the recommendations of the tie campaign were with us, and they absolutely complement each other and match us. There's not a disconnect between them, and I think that probably reflects the work that we took in engaging with them and with LGBT Youth Scotland throughout the year.
Can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 to agree to the establishment of the short life implementation team? Agree 2.4 incorporates 2.41, 42, 43, 44 and 45. Next one. Now, Gillian assures me that the video is all ready to go at the end of the meeting, so move on to agenda item 13 on page 331, supporting learners delivering a sustainable service, and this is an interim report. The paper provides updates to members of the review of the Supporting Learners Service. It outlines why the review is not being completed as originally envisaged. This is because of ongoing and significant operational pressure to continue to deliver the constituent parts of this wide-ranging service, the complexity of the service, legislation underlying it, and the need to challenge perceptions related to the expectations on the service. Our need to await further detail on national guidance and the expectation this places upon schools, and the need to revise systems and procedure as relating to service provision to further enable evidencing impact. Structures in place to undertake the review and to implement incremental change as the review progresses. This will be reported to committee on an ongoing basis. It's envisaged that the review will be concluded by November 2019. And we have Hugh Smith to speak to this. Hugh, anything you want to add?
I don't think so, Chair. I'm obviously able to take any questions.
Members, Adam?
Thanks, Chair. I think I'm pleased that we're doing this piece of work, and I wasn't surprised to read about the budget being stretched. I think in all the conversations I've had with officers, teachers and head teachers about additional support for learning, that is very much the impression that has came across to me, and I'm very much of the opinion that you can't spend enough on supporting additional support for learning, because it's not just about the complex needs, but also about those one-off needs that sometimes kids have at various stages of their school career. In 3.3, the end of the paragraph ends with, furthermore, there has been an expectation that the supporting learners budget will contribute to our council's savings requirements for the 2019-20 and onwards. I think I certainly wouldn't cut additional support for learning budgets ever if it was my sole gift, but since that we're carrying out this report, and we've heard it'll be reporting sort of end of next year, I think I would quite like to see a recommendation that basically there won't be an expectation for the supporting learners budget to fulfil some budget cuts next year. I'll quite happily make that indefinitely, but certainly until this has actually had a chance to report and to present its findings, I think that's the type of recommendation I'd like to add and propose once everyone's had a chance to speak.
Thank you, Chair. It may be appropriate to come in at the end of this, but it was just really a request. We've got various drafts on the papers here, and I can't read them. They're all in black and various shades of grey. So page 346, 345, I don't know which line relates to which, because it's a black and white printout that we've got. So it's very difficult to actually look at that when we're looking at our hard copies in front of us. So my request is, can we actually have those pages in colour? I understand that it's cheaper to print all the documents in black and white, but where there's specific graphs, can we have that in colour? And also, in terms of the table that we've got on here on page 340, there's lots of figures, but there's no headings on these, and it's very difficult. And I understand that there may be issues insofar that one child may receive many hours versus another child who may receive just a few, but the table that we've got, it's very hard to get context of what this table means, because there's no context to it. So it's more sort of a layout of papers question I have at this point.
I can get the colour version, sorry, because I did the same when I printed off the papers, and that actually it was black and white, I couldn't read it, so I assumed that maybe you guys got it in colour, so apologies for that. But we can get that circulated, the two graphs, because I think the colour, it does really kind of help identify, and it's helpful. In terms of the tables, absolutely, this was a sort of an interim that I think members may have seen before, that we've circulated previously. It was just to give a sense of that was the baseline in terms of the allocation for this year, but there will be more analysis coming forward to members at the March committee.
Thank you. And obviously the electronic online version does have the coloured lines in there. Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. Wanted to go back to the point that Councillor Wilson made. Certainly, I'm very much in agreement with him. I noted the reference that was made in the report about the expectation in terms of contributing towards the Council's savings requirement. Not an expectation on the part of the administration. I think that's perfectly fair. If he is making a recommendation or a motion, I'm quite happy to second that.
Thanks, Rob. Richard?
Thanks, Chair. We had earlier from our primary school representative, and this report sort of reinforces that, the significant operational pressures across the supporting learners service. We're really paying the price for swinging cuts made in 2015. They're hitting home, and only children with the most complex needs are getting the support they need, and classroom teachers are spending disproportionate time on needy children. And speaking to those who are involved in the meeting additional support needs, from the bottom to the top of the organisation, they feel unvalued, a bit like little orphan Annie, unloved, with no one standing up for them. So it's great to hear Councillor Wilson saying that he's going to try and protect the support for learning budget, and if he was a real hero and a champion, then perhaps he can realign the education budget to find some more money for them. Because lack of resources means more children are unsupported and struggling in the classroom, or actually put into learning centres where they're receiving an inappropriate curriculum. Children are at home not being educated at all, and some parents don't have a choice but to home educate. I'm willing to give these proposals a chance. I'm not sure whether it's just tinkering around the edges or whether they will make a real difference. Hopefully they'll use their resources more efficiently. So I just ask Hugh for some clarification on some of the points on page 334, 310. The realignment of the provision, and it says existing non-class-based supporting learner provision will be changed. However, we're going to non-school-based teams will allow for more effective targeting of children. Could you just explain how that'll work? It's good to see that we're looking to augment the support for children on the autistic spectrum. It says there's going to augment the provision. Well, how big an augmentation will that be? And can we assure that this will make a real difference to the provision across the region?
Thank you, Councillor Brady. I'm sorry that I got a staff feel unloved. It's a very challenging environment, and I think Julie Irving kind of summed up the experience very well for members at the beginning of the committee. Couldn't add to anything there. It is a challenging environment. I think it's important to remember that children spend about 25% of their childhood in schools. We're seeing that there's a 75% out with school, which is a challenge, and we're seeing increasing numbers of children, very young children, that are coming into primary one with behaviours that we've not experienced in such significant quantities before, which are, you're absolutely right, which tends to draw the resource. And what we do is we know we've got a third of our children in our schools have identified additional support needs, but we will always have to target the resource where the greatest need is. And that's one of the challenges in terms of getting this right, is that how do we balance making sure that that third of our children do get access to some support. The majority of that is, in reality, and always will be, is through their class teacher. But how do we make sure that those children with the most complex needs aren't simply securing all the resource? And what we've been looking at is that we have capacity within the service at the moment that isn't directly allocated to schools, that has been used on an individual circumstance. What we're suggesting and proposing in this realigning is that actually we target some of those small groups of children, like children with social communication difficulties, that we know we're struggling to meet their needs. We know that their behaviour can often be, in communicating their needs, that can be quite challenging behaviours. Looked after children, and we obviously reference some of the work that's going on in terms of looked after children, but in terms of making sure that those children who will have experienced many different pathways to arrive at that point of being looked after, but we know it's probably going to be trauma-based a lot of the time. We know that trauma impacts on their ability to be school-ready, to be engaged in learning on a day-to-day basis, and so those are some of the challenges. So we think that by realigning some of that resource that we've had, which has been directed more through schools, directing it to some of those target groups, we hope that we can alleviate some of the pressure that's on the resources in schools, that will then allow our colleagues, our head teachers and the school management teams and PTs to be able to allocate that resource further. Again, it's a similar issue in terms of our learning centres, and you're right, we have lots of children in our learning centres. We're pretty much full most of the time. We're mixing behaviours with disabilities. Those are some of the challenges that we've got as well. So again, trying to separate that out and look at what does that resource need as a standalone as opposed to just be within the school. So I suppose rather long-winded as usual, apologies, but the effort is to realign the resources that we've got at the sharp end to alleviate some of the pressure on the resources that are allocated within schools.
And I think also in terms of the rollout of 1,140 hours preschool education to vulnerable 2-year-olds, that's another aspect which you could actually look at as part of the overall pattern, how we try to address some of these problems. Katie?
Thank you, Chairman, on that, and thank you for the report. I don't think anybody thinks for a moment that this is an easy task to try and find solutions for, let alone a sustainable service, because the reality is it's a very difficult situation. I know in the report that autism is mentioned quite rightly, quite a lot in the report, and it's something that I brought up at the last committee. Dyslexia isn't mentioned once in the report, and as an elected member with dyslexia, I really find it difficult to find why it's not reported there, because actually there's huge amounts of our children who will be struggling, and actually adaptive technology isn't mentioned at all in this. We had in the previous item about the rollout of our Wi-Fi and getting children to bring in their own devices. I'm really fortunate that I'm supported in my role as an elected member. I have adapted software on my tablet. It can read to me, I can use a headphone, I can type up. It's brilliant. When I'm tired, it's absolutely invaluable. So how are we supporting our young people with adaptive technology? Crucially, we need people involvement. Of course, that's a huge issue, but also there is technology out there, and how are we trying to sustain our service by using that adaptive technology, especially in senior school, but also in our primary schools, where children which are maybe struggling with their reading and writing, it might be a case that these children who are struggling with their writing may actually never have to rely on that because they can use the adaptive technology.
So we have a contract with Call Scotland, which is an organisation which is based in Edinburgh University, which is a national organisation that works with most local authorities around adaptive technology. We would therefore, if an individual young person is identified as with needs that in terms of assistive adaptive technology, we would then be engaging with them. We would review that locally, and first and foremost, we would review that with our colleagues in IT in terms of have we got local solutions that we could, or is the IT the answer, or is there another issue? But ultimately, there is a chain of process that would lead you to an assessment by call. They would then recommend what technology would be most appropriate. They would generally lend that to a young person to do an assessment in terms of does that make the difference? And if that was, then they would then be coming back to say this is the technology that they should be using. And again, we would be talking to our IT colleagues to see locally, can we provide that, or would that be something that they would be able to source through their national contracts in terms of being able to provide support?
Timothy?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered what the expected timescale would be for beginning to be able to evaluate the success of the provisions to improve the attainment for looked after children.
Well, the funding that's referred to in the appendix, which is from the Scottish Government, which is effectively a subpart of PEF, Pupil Equity Funding, requires us to be able to report on a 6-monthly time span in terms of being able to evidence. So every intervention that we undertake will need to have a before and an after measure. Otherwise, they won't give us the money. So we're using the same approach that we use that our schools are using with their PEF funding. That will be how we'll do that. But again, as I said before, it's and I suppose that's a key thing for us. It's the whole team around looked after children. We will have them for a part of their time. We need to work much more closely, and I think that we've got structures in place now through the LAC Raising Attainment to make sure that all parties, health and social work and others, are all around the table, making sure that each looked after young person we're clear about what their needs are, we're clear about how we can support them to be in school, because if they're not in school, they're not attaining, but once they're in school, they're ready to learn, and that whatever supports are in place need to be. And for some, that will be some additional tutoring, and we're looking at those options, because we know that young people that have been looked after are likely to have missed parts of their learning and teaching experience.
Julie?
Thank you. It was really a question regarding the 1140 hours as well. Obviously, working in preschool, we have 3 different intakes throughout the year, and we've had children transferring from other places. And what we're finding is, even if these children have had support in other nurseries, they land at mine with none. So how are we going to ensure within all of this that we can, the funding follows the child? If the child has support needs and they're recognised and known about, we need to have some kind of system in place where they don't fall through the gaps and you end up with staff trying to cope with children who do have social and emotional behavioural difficulties. They're known about, it's all recognised, but we are not getting the support to support those children. And that's that has a big impact, and it happens not just nursery, it does happen across schools as well. We get children coming into our authority or moving around schools. Quite often children are struggling in one school, and the answer sometimes is, let's move them somewhere else, give them a fresh start. But the fresh start needs to be supported. And I've got real concerns that we aren't getting it right for these children. I don't know the answer. I know we are limited with funding, but we have to support these children with additional needs. We have to find a way to do it.
Absolutely, and I suppose that one of the challenges that we have a fixed point in time for our allocation of support, and that doesn't work because we know that children's needs change, children move for lots of different reasons, and we do have a system in place which would be a request from the school in terms of needing additional support, and we meet every 2 weeks to consider all of those requests, and through part of the child's planning. I'm not suggesting that means that everything's solved, and because we're still, that all the resource that we've got is already in our schools. It's difficult to extract sometimes a part of somebody to be able to move them to another school. But I guess that's the ongoing dialogue in terms of how we fill those gaps as best as we can. And that is a constant conversation with schools, with ourselves, looking across the piece when we're moving children. Can we move support with them, or can we not? Absolutely, there's no easy responses. I suppose the annual allocation doesn't help us. I would like our staff to be much more flexible, to be able to shift them as and when they're needed. But we know that very quickly they can become ingrained in the general support within a school as well. I do think 1140 gives us some opportunities to think about the model at the moment. Like with learning centres, the allocation for learning and childcare is within the general school allocation. 2-year-olds is a particular challenge because that we know they need more support, and obviously that's why the ratios are different, but it is a challenge. So I think there's still opportunities, and I suppose we've been working, and COGS have been working with the early learning and childcare team to look at that implementation, to look at real life kind of resourcing to make sure that actually we do have a service that can support children in their earliest years, because we know that's where we'll make the biggest difference. We know that's we had 7 P1s came through at the start of this session that weren't on anybody's radar, that had experienced exclusion within the first 2 or 3 weeks, that have required a lot of additional support. So there's things that we need to do, Julie, you're absolutely right, and we'll continue to work with the early learning and childcare team to look at what that funding model looks like for 1140, to try and give a bit more ring fencing, I think is the best option. And then if it's ring fenced, we can maybe make it a little bit more mobile and flexible. Because children engaging at the start of the session, their needs will change by the time they get to Christmas and after Christmas. But as you say, with the 3 intakes, that's added complexity.
Thanks again, Chairman. We've just got a couple of points for you to comment on. One of the positive changes we made about 3 years ago was to front end the money in support to early learning. You would think that would bring benefits, but what we're hearing though is that children are even less ready than they were before for primary school at the moment. Maybe you can comment on that. And that one is we've got information for all the all the primary schools and the support hours, obviously the academies and high schools, they're devolved budgets, but I think it would be interesting to have a cross-region picture of what support has been given across the region, because at the end of the day, councillors and the authority are responsible for making sure that additional support needs are met across there. So it'd be interesting to have those, because some of the complaints I get about lack of support are from secondary schools, and especially the transition from primary into secondary.
I think you're right, we're not necessarily seeing the premium of the increase to 600 hours as yet, but I'm not sorry, that would be unfair. I think that for some children, we're not seeing that. We know that some children, the transition, the early level should be actually, it's a seamless transition, but we still, at times, I think, are experiencing that the transition can be too much and too big a jump in terms of going from early learning and childcare to a P1 class. We're dealing with, general issues, and I think colleagues in social work that would be reporting the same, that we're seeing increasing trends of much younger children with complex needs that are communicating those needs through very challenging behaviours. Could kind of give you lots of thoughts that I have, but I don't think that would just be kind of a view and an opinion. That we are seeing a different world out there for our young people, and they're communicating their needs differently. And in that point, Richard, Councillor Roddy, I think I've lost your second question, which was
information on secondary school support.
Secondary. Interestingly, we devolved the ASL teachers to secondary head teachers about 8 years ago. We are looking at that as part of the review in terms of what's the capacity look like in our secondaries, in terms of the teaching capacity for additional supports, given where they were 8 years ago and given where they are now, and in terms of whether that's relating to some of the pressures. Interesting, I think, when you look at that data and you look at the secondaries, the variance in the number of hours that some of the secondaries have got. If you do a pro rata, and we have that, we've done the pro rata in terms of the hours, it's some quite significant changes, and we're looking to see, does that reflect in terms of the teacher capacity? Because we know the one thing that all the research says is that all our young people with additional support needs need more access to teachers, not more access to learning assistants or others. It's teaching that will make the biggest difference for them.
Just touches up on that very last point. It's in Appendix 2, Chairman. It's page 340. If you look at the Stranraer cluster, there's an allocated hours there of, Stranraer Academy itself, 496.5. I think it's about 159 more pupils as well there is in Annan Academy. And you see the difference. It's quite considerable, 159.75. Just, is that identified need? Is that favouritism? What is that? It maybe goes back to what, just wonder what that is. You could read that in a whole level of different ways, but clearly there's a school of a very similar size getting a lot more resource put to it than another one. So you could read into that quite a few times across, has already been alluded to, but I just wondered in that case, why is that?
I suppose the first is the Stranraer Academy has a learning centre in it, so that they're dealing with very complex and it's difficult. But if you, because we don't have another secondary, we have Lockerbie primary and secondary that has a learning centre for young people with complex needs. But I think it's a point well made in terms of the disparity. If we spoke to any of our secondary schools, they'll say we need more, and that would include Stranraer. One of the challenges that we have is that the staff that we have are the staff that we have, and they're on contracts within locations. So the level of flexibility that we have to move colleagues around is limited. So we still have some historic some historic imbalances in terms of the allocation that we're slowly trying to work out the system as colleagues decide to leave the service.
I just wonder if that question could be answered in more detail. I think in 6 months or something we get a further report, but I think we need to understand that better. Is it actually needed? Is it just a historical methodology that's being used? I think it's important that they going back to where the need is, the money follows the child, so on and so forth, that we can clearly follow that openly and transparently.
We're planning to bring that back to the March committee to be able to give you that information. So it's absolutely.
Can we move to the recommendations? Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Hugh, could you give us some more information about the virtual LEC education team, which is on page 338?
So at the moment, Councillor, we're in the process of recruiting that virtual team. So we have the Scottish Government funding, which is the PEF funding, which is absolutely targeted to before and after impact on attainment. So what we're looking at is bringing in, and it is again, and I've made the point earlier, this is about access to teachers. So we are looking at creating a virtual team because we know we don't have teachers waiting to be employed by us. So we'll be looking at part-time teachers, we'll be looking at teachers that we have on the supply list, teachers specifically that have got all teachers do, but teachers that would be able to engage with some of our more disengaged young people and be able to support them in terms of literacy and numeracy will be our key targets for that. So we will have teaching capacity. We will also have a focus in terms of some support as well. So not just the teachers, but others that will be able to work with them. We're going to trial from Christmas to March. We are trialing putting in some staff into both the employability and skills team to focus, because the raising attainment for care experienced children is all the way up to 25. So the skills and employability team will have a couple of people based within them that will be focusing on educational attainment for care experienced young people. That's a small test of change. And we're also going to be looking in terms of that with the employability and skills, and I'm sorry, I forgot the second, with our children's homes, so that we know that the two children's homes at Ken Ryan and Hawthorne Road, that we're going to actually look to put some support workers in there who will also have access to that virtual team to be able to make sure that those young people that are in our residential units can get the additional support that they need, knowing that they're likely to have had a disrupted learning experience.
How many FTE teachers do you envisage?
I think I was looking at the spreadsheet yesterday, I think we're looking at 3.5 to 4, not quite sure, but it will be made up of a number of different staff. It won't be 3.5, it will be the FTE rather than those as individuals.
If we can move to the recommendations, including consideration of the additional recommendations. So can we note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3, agree to receive a further report of this committee in the spring of 2019, and there's an additional recommendation with regard to protecting the supporting learner budget. Do you have a formal words, Adam?
Probably say that put it effectively just to ensure that there's no expectation that the supporting learners budget will contribute to the council savings requirements for 2019-20, and will not be expected until such time as this report has been submitted to this committee.
Yeah, could you give that to...
and until such time as the review that's been carried out here has been completed and reported to this committee.
Right. Yeah. I mean, basically what we're agreeing to do is not to make any savings to this budget until such time as the review's been completed and reported back to this this committee. Okay with that? Yeah. Right. Thank you, members. And moving on to the final report, Home Education Introduction of New Policy, Agenda Item 14 on page 347. The original policy with regard to this was introduced in line with the guidance in 2007. It's been revised since, but was not presented to members as the revisions were not considered to be of significance. However, recent challenges to the policy has prompted an introduction of a revised policy and an opportunity to raise awareness of the home education community with elected members. And it says, envisage there will be further development to local policy in practice, which will be reported to members. I'm aware that all members received copies of 2 emails late last night with regard to the policy, challenging the policy. So, although I'm quite prepared to allow the debate on the paper, etc., what I do propose is we defer agreeing the introduction of the withdrawal from the school role and home education policy at this point, to be considered a further meeting of the committee once we've had a chance to look at consultation, any modifications which you want to have with the policy itself. So, Hugh, is there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to sort of highlight to members that the policy that is before you is actually is draft in part response to some of the concerns that were shared with you via email. It's been quite a protracted process. Home education is not an easy place to be engaged in because there are lots of different perspectives. Our efforts to date have been to respond to concerns raised by individual families that have gone through that process and then have challenged us through the complaints process. So our efforts to get this to you today was that we've had it signed off by legal services, and we thought the sooner we had this before you, the better, but absolutely accept the points made by the correspondent that a consultation period with members of the homeschooling community and organisations and other agencies involved in homeschooling would be helpful to give members reassurance that we've got a policy that will actually that address any concerns that they may have and other parties may have.
And obviously any other issues or any points that members of the committee want to make at this point would be useful. And I think in terms of the consultation, what we're talking about, 3 months. Okay. Ian?
It was in the last point, but we're beyond it. It was the last item. I was trying to catch your eye, but you never seen me.
Katie?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come in on this item. I really welcome the fact that we're going to go out and review this with the people that are actually using the service and actually who engage with that. I do have a slight concern as to why our numbers have increased quite so much. You know, almost 500% increase in 2017-18. There might be questions around that, but that's for a separate debate. In terms of taking the policy forward, I have 2 points that I would like to just raise. One, there's mention within the Scottish Government guidelines issues around flexi-schooling, and I understand that we in Dumfries and Galloway have a policy on flexi-schooling, and I'm aware that several families take advantage of this. There's no reference to it, and while I understand it's a separate policy, it might be useful just to highlight the fact that we do have a separate policy. So my request would be that we include that, even a link to that policy. My second request or concern is, my understanding is that officers will work extremely hard with other agencies to come forward with a recommendation that would go to the head of department, and that at that point a decision would be made. At what point could that decision be challenged by a parent? You know, is there an opportunity for not a complaint as such, but if the parents wish to challenge that, at what point can they do so, and how would that be taken forward? Because obviously there may be legal ramifications on that, and there's no mention of that within this draft policy. So therefore, it would be appropriate, I think, when we get the draft policy back after consultation, what would that policy be? Because there's no point in having a policy if we don't actually have it down in writing. So those are my sort of 2 issues at this point. Thank you.
Absolutely, and just to say that we've double-checked in terms of the appeal processes and matters, and actually there is no right of appeal on this, but clearly we as a local authority need to come up with a process to deal with that, deal with any complaints. So absolutely, we'll make sure that that's included in the draft that comes back to you for consideration as a policy. That will be part of the consultation with stakeholders across Dumfries and Galloway as well, as will the reference to flexi school. And I think we'll probably go away from here and have further discussions to whether we should be bringing the flexi school policy separately, because I think it's a document that probably would be helpful for members to have sight of to understand the context for that, because it is, as you say, different from homeschooling.
Richard?
Thanks, Chair. The last item I referred to parents been forced to to home educate their children because the support wasn't provided in schools. Just quote briefly from an email from one of the parents. My son has been home educated for a year, despite a 2-year transition process from primary to secondary school and a professional support team well into double figures. High school was shambolic. Unilaterally, they decided to throw all transition planning in the bin and mainstream my son, who has a learning age of 7 and could not read and write. So, obviously, there's anecdotal evidence. There's quite a number of the people home educated have children with additional support for learning needs. Have we got a figure on how many of these children are home educated?
We don't collect that information, but absolutely there's a national and UK-wide issue in terms of rising numbers of children that are being home educated. And there is some of our interest groups are very clearly highlighting that this is in relation to their needs not being met within school. I would want to reassure members that we never pressure parents to home educate their children. That is a choice that parents have a right to exercise. And sometimes the concerns are that the mismatch between what we feel that are appropriate to meet a young person's needs and what a families feel is appropriate to meet their needs. But in those instances, we will continue, and we do work with families to try and find alternative solutions. But ultimately, if they make that choice, that is a choice that they're making.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back on this. I've remembered the third point I wanted to make, and that was for those children who never entered nursery, and then subsequently don't enter school. They're not included within this policy, is my understanding. Because they've not come into the system, we don't refer to them from the withdrawal. However, that's not to say that at some point those children might decide to come into schooling and then withdraw again. So therefore, because we don't have any details of those children that are currently being homeschooled because they've never entered the system, is it possible to put this consultation out via the health visitors? And, because obviously we do work with a wide range of professional services, just to ensure that we reach those families that haven't engaged with us previously, to give them the option of engaging with us, if possible.
I suppose just to reassure members that we do have means and mechanisms. I'm actually the named person for all homeschooled children in Dumfries and Galloway. So if colleagues in other services come across children that haven't been removed, that they think we wouldn't be aware of, then we would be contacted and alerted. The challenge for us is that in terms of our statutory our role is that it's limited to a degree to what parents want us. We have, as a local authority, a statutory duty to ensure that all children have a suitable and efficient education. In terms of ensuring that is in a home education, that's difficult. We have no right of access to the child, no right of access to the home. An annual return of paperwork can be presented to us. I'm suggesting this is the worst case scenario. Most of our home school educators actually work very well with us and are happy to engage with the process and support us, but we do have some that are out there that don't. So we do have details, though we also have families that would ask us to opt out of us holding any information on them, and obviously with their rights under the GDPR, that's a challenge for us as well. So it's a messy soup, I suppose, and we know that the colleagues at national level are looking at it, and because of some of the challenges in terms of balancing up the rights of children and the rights of parents to make decisions about their children. So absolutely, but we will, as part of that consultation, ensure that our key stakeholders, which are Police Scotland, the Health Board and social work within the Council, are involved in the discussions around the process.
We move to the recommendations. 2.1, can we note 2.1? Can we note 2.2? And can we modify 2.3 to effectively, and Lucy might help me out here, defer agreeing the introduction of the withdrawal from school role and home education policy, awaiting the results of the 3-month consultation process. And that will then be reported back to the March committee, or yeah. Okay. Thank you, members. I've got no other business. You're delaying seeing the film.
Chair, can I just ask for our future meetings that we can have a list of abbreviations at the back of the paper? There's so many abbreviations in here, and there's no index or link. Just for future meetings, can I take
that used to be on all committees and seems to have dropped.
Well,
off the process.
it appears to be missing, so thank you.
No. Lucy tells me that's been addressed. Lucy says that's been addressed.
It was raised in another committee the other day, so I did feed that back, but I'll emphasise the point again. So.